An injured dog appeared, whining at Carol's door. "Go away, I don't have any food," she said, but he wouldn't stop barking and pulling at her clothes, gesturing toward the abandoned house. When she finally peered through the neighbor's window, the discovery changed everything. Before we begin today's story, let me know where you're watching from. Feel free to grab a coffee or get comfortable on the couch, and please don't forget to support us. You just have to hit the like button, and I'll know you enjoy this type of story. All right, ready? Let's get started. Tuesday morning began like any other for Carol. At 58, the retired English teacher had a well-established routine: coffee at 7, reading the newspaper, and then a few hours dedicated to the garden she tended with such care in her front yard. It was her refuge, especially after her children moved to other cities, and she found herself alone in a house that once bustled with life. The noise started softly, a faint whimper, almost imperceptible, coming from the porch. Carol looked up from her rosebed and saw a thin, dirty figure lying on her doorstep. It was a medium-sized dog with matted golden and white fur, shivering noticeably. "Oh, my goodness," she murmured, wiping her hands on her apron. "Where did you come from?" The animal lifted its head with difficulty. Carol could see it was hurt. There was a fresh-looking wound on its right side, and it limped badly when it tried to stand. But what caught her attention most were its eyes. There was something in them that went beyond hunger or pain. It was almost urgency. "You poor thing. You're injured," she said, approaching slowly. "But I can't help you right now, sweetie. I don't have any experience with dogs." The dog tried to get up again, this time with more determination. It let out a weak bark, then a louder one. Carol glanced around, embarrassed. It was early, and she didn't want to disturb the neighbors. "Shh, be quiet. Look, I'll get you some water, okay? But then you need to find your owner." As she turned to go inside, the animal did something unexpected. It gently bit the hem of her apron and began to pull in the opposite direction of the door. "Hey, what are you doing?" Carol tried to pull away, but the dog insisted, tugging her toward the street. "Stop that!" The animal let her go, but didn't give up. It ran a few yards toward the house across the street, that old, seemingly abandoned house where no one lived anymore, and barked loudly, looking back at her as if trying to communicate something important. Carol crossed her arms, intrigued despite her irritation. "You want me to go over there? Why?" The dog ran back to her, once again grabbed the hem of her apron, and repeated the motion. This time Carol paid closer attention. There was something almost human in the way it looked at her, as if it were desperate to make her understand. "This is very strange," she muttered to herself. "Dogs don't do this, unless—" A distant memory surfaced. As a child, she had read stories about dogs that saved people, that had a special intuition for detecting danger. But that was something out of a movie, not real life. The animal barked again, this time more forcefully, and started walking toward the abandoned house, stopping every few feet to make sure she was paying attention. Carol looked at the house across the street. It was an old structure, painted a faded blue, with windows that were always shut and a yard overgrown with weeds. She had lived on this street for 15 years and had never seen any activity there. The neighbors always said the house was empty, that the owner had moved away years ago and never returned. But now, looking more closely, she noticed something she had never seen before. One of the front windows was slightly ajar. The dog barked once more, a sound that echoed down the silent street and made Carol jump. She looked around, worried about drawing attention, but noticed there was no one on the street. It was just her, the injured animal, and a growing feeling that something was not right. All right," she said, more to herself than to the dog. "I'll go take a look, but if there's nothing there, you'll have to find somewhere else to stay." She crossed the street slowly, the dog limping beside her. Up close, the house looked even more derelict than she had imagined. The blue paint was peeling, there were cobwebs on the windows, and the smell of mildew was noticeable even from the outside. The animal went straight to the front door and began sniffing intently around the threshold. Then it did something that made Carol's heart pound. It started to whine and scratch at the door with its paws, as if trying to get in. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, moving closer to the open window. "What are you trying to show me?" Carol pressed her ear to the window and stood silently for a few seconds. At first, she heard nothing but her own racing heart. But then, very faintly, almost imperceptibly, came a sound that sent a chill down her spine. It was a voice, a human voice, weak and trembling. "Help! Someone! Please!" Carol recoiled from the window as if she'd been shocked. Her hands were shaking as she looked at the dog, who was now watching her with those eyes that seemed to say, "I tried to tell you." "Oh my God, there's someone in there," she whispered. "How is that possible?" The animal barked softly, as if in approval that she had finally understood. Carol looked around, unsure what to do. Should she call the police? The fire department? Or first try to find out who was inside? "Hello?" she called out, tapping lightly on the window. "Is someone in there? Are you okay?" The reply came more clearly this time, though still very weak. "Please, help. I can't. Get up." It was definitely a woman's voice, elderly from the sound of it. Carol felt her years of training as a teacher kick in. She had always known how to handle a crisis, had always been the person others ran to for help. "Listen, ma'am," she called back. "My name is Carol. I live right across the street. I'm going to find a way to get in there, okay? Don't worry, you're not alone." She tested the open window and found she could slide it further up. It wasn't enough to climb through, but she could see inside the house. The living room was dark, but natural light was coming from the back, and she could make out old furniture covered in sheets. "Where are you?" she yelled through the window. "Kitchen! I fell! I can't!" The dog, which had been quiet while she was talking, now ran to the back of the house. Carol followed and discovered a back door that was unlocked. "How did you know about this?" she asked the animal, which wagged its tail shyly. She pushed the door open slowly. The creak of the hinges echoed through the silent house. "Ma'am, I'm coming in. It's okay." The kitchen was at the end of a narrow hallway. Carol walked slowly, the dog at her side, following the sound of the voice that was now closer. "I'm here, on the floor. Thank you. Thank you for coming." When Carol reached the kitchen, what she saw took her breath away. A very thin, elderly woman was lying on the ceramic tile floor next to the table. She was dressed in a light blue housecoat, her grey hair fanned out around her face. Her eyes, though tired, lit up when she saw Carol. "Thank God," the old woman whispered. I thought no one would come." Carol rushed to the woman's side and knelt, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and concern. The woman looked to be in her 80s, with delicate features marked by time and the last few days of suffering. "My name is Carol," she said, gently taking the woman's hand. "What's your name? Are you hurt?" "Helen," the woman replied in a weak voice. "Helen Miller. I fell the day before yesterday. I was trying to get some sugar from the high cabinet and lost my balance. My leg. I think it might be broken." Carol quickly assessed the situation. Mrs. Miller's right leg was bent at an odd angle, and there were signs she had tried to get up multiple times. Pillows scattered on the floor, an overturned chair, scuff marks where she had dragged herself. "Mrs. Miller, I'm going to call for an ambulance right now, okay? You shouldn't try to move." "I don't have a phone," Mrs. Miller whispered. "They cut the line last month because I couldn't pay the bill." Carol's heart ached. She immediately pulled her cell phone from her pocket. "Don't worry, I have one. I'm calling now." While dialing 911, Carol noticed the dog had slowly approached Mrs. Miller, To her surprise, the elderly woman reached out a hand and stroked the animal's head, tears in her eyes. "Rex," she whispered. "My Rex, you did it, boy. You brought help." Carol paused mid-call. "He's your dog?" "Yes." Mrs. Miller smiled through her tears. "He was with me when I fell. I tried to keep him here, but he kept going to the door, trying to get out. I thought he'd run off because he was scared, but he went to get help." Carol finished, a shiver running down her spine. "Hello, 911?" She spoke into the phone. "I need an ambulance immediately. An elderly woman has fallen in her home and has been on the floor for 2 days, possible leg fracture." She gave the address and confirmed she would stay with the patient until help arrived. After hanging up, Carol sat on the floor beside Mrs. Miller. "How did no one know you lived here? The neighbors always said this house was abandoned." Mrs. Miller closed her eyes for a moment. "I've lived here for 40 years. After my husband died 5 years ago, I started to keep to myself. My children live far away. I don't have many friends left. I stopped leaving the house, had everything delivered. People must have thought I'd moved away too." "You were on the floor for 2 whole days." "Yes, Rex never left my side, but I knew he needed water, food. Yesterday morning he was so agitated he managed to push open the back door. He was always clever like that. I thought he was gone for good." Carol looked at Rex, who was now lying beside his owner like a faithful guardian. "He came to my house. He was injured, hungry, but he didn't want food or water. He just wanted me to come with him." "He walked all over the street like that?" Mrs. Miller stroked the dog's fur. "With his hurt little paw? How did he get hurt?" "When I fell, I knocked over a lamp. There was broken glass on the floor. I think he must have stepped on a piece when he came to help me." The sound of an ambulance siren began to echo in the distance, growing louder with each second. Carol held Mrs. Miller's hand. "Help is on the way. Everything is going to be all right now. Thank you," the old woman whispered. "Thank you for listening to Rex. Thank you for coming." Carol looked at the dog, who watched them both with those intelligent, loyal eyes. "I think I'm the one who should be thanking him. He taught me a lesson today that I'll never forget." The paramedics arrived in minutes, and Carol quickly guided them through the back door to the kitchen. Rex moved back a little to give them space, but never left his owner's side, watching every movement intently. "Ma'am, my name is Chris. I'm a paramedic," said the man in the blue uniform as he knelt beside Mrs. Miller. "We're going to take a look at you and get you the care you need, okay?" Mrs. Miller nodded, but her eyes immediately searched for Rex. "My dog. He can't be left here alone. He got hurt trying to help me." Carol stepped forward. "Mrs. Miller, if you'll allow me, I can take care of Rex until you're back from the hospital." "You would do that?" The old woman's eyes filled with tears again. "Of course. After everything he did today, it's the least I can do." As the paramedics worked, checking Mrs. Miller's vital signs and immobilizing her leg, Carol looked around the house. It was modest but well kept, with antique furniture that told the story of a lifetime. There were photographs on the walls showing a younger Mrs. Miller, always beside a smiling man who must have been her husband. "Carol," Mrs. Miller called out as she was being placed on the stretcher. "There's dog food for Rex in the utility room cabinet. He likes to sleep on the green cushion in the living room. And thank you so much." "You don't need to thank me. I'll take very good care of him." After the ambulance left, Carol was alone in the house with Rex. The dog seemed lost, pacing back and forth and whining softly. "Hey, boy," she said gently. "Your mom is going to be okay. You saved her. Now let's take care of you." Carol found the food where she was told and filled a bowl with fresh water. Rex ate and drank voraciously. It was obvious he was starved and dehydrated. Then she examined the wound on his paw. "This needs to be cleaned," she murmured. I'm taking you to the vet." She called a nearby veterinary clinic and explained the situation. The receptionist, touched by the story, said they could see Rex immediately. At the clinic, the veterinarian, Dr. Peterson, examined Rex carefully. "It's a deep cut, but it's clean. I'll put in a few stitches and give him an antibiotic. He was very brave to have walked so long on this wound. Doctor, is it normal for a dog to do that, to seek help like that?" "Doctor." Peterson smiled as he applied a local anesthetic to Rex's paw. "Dogs are much smarter than most people think. They have an incredible ability to read situations and act accordingly. Rex understood his owner was in danger and that he couldn't help her alone. So he went to get help, the only way he knew how." "But how did he know I would help?" "Canine instinct is an extraordinary thing. They can identify compassionate people who will respond to their pleas for help. He probably observed you before, saw how you care for your garden, how you carry yourself. Rex chose you specifically." As the vet finished tending to the wound, Carol thought about everything that had happened that morning. She had started the day worrying only about her roses, and now she was involved in the lives of two creatures who needed her. Dr. Peterson, how long will Mrs. Miller be in the hospital? Fractures in the elderly can take several weeks to heal, especially if she went a long time without care. She'll likely need physical therapy too. Carol nodded. "So Rex will be staying with me for a while." "You don't have experience with dogs?" "None, but I think it's about time I learned." When they left the clinic, Rex was walking better, with a small bandage on his paw. Carol took him home and showed him where he could sleep, eat, and play. The dog explored the new environment with curiosity, but she noticed he frequently looked in the direction of Mrs. Miller's house. "I know, boy, you miss her, but we'll visit her at the hospital tomorrow, okay?" For the first time since he had appeared on her doorstep, Rex gave a real wag of his tail. That night, Carol had trouble sleeping. Rex had settled on the cushion she brought from Mrs. Miller's house, but she could hear his occasional sighs from the hallway. It was obvious he missed his owner. Around 2 in the morning, Carol heard soft footsteps and got up to check. Rex was in the living room, sitting in front of the window that faced Mrs. Miller's house, staring intently in that direction. "You're worried about her, aren't you?" Carol sat on the floor beside him. "I am too." Rex rested his head on her arm, and for the first time, Carol felt a real connection with the animal. There was something profoundly human in the way he showed his concern, as if he were capable of a love she had never experienced before. The next morning, Carol called the hospital. Mrs. Miller had undergone surgery to set the fracture and was stable but still sedated. Visiting hours wouldn't start until late afternoon. "Rex, let's do something," she said after hanging up. "Let's tidy up your mum's house for when she comes back. What do you think?" The dog seemed to understand and followed Carol to the house across the street. She used the keys Mrs. Miller had given the paramedics, which they had left with her. The house was quiet and filled with memories. Carol started in the kitchen, cleaning up the shards of glass that were still scattered about, reorganizing the things that had fallen when Mrs. Miller had her accident. Rex accompanied her into every room, as if supervising the work. While she cleaned, Carol discovered more about Helen Miller's life. There were unopened letters piled on the living room table, some with overdue notices. Photographs showed a woman who had once been full of life, always surrounded by people, a life that, little by little, had turned to solitude. How did no one notice she needed help? Carol asked Rex, who was sniffing an armchair that was clearly Mrs. Miller's favorite spot. On the kitchen table, she found a small notebook where Mrs. Miller wrote her thoughts. The last few entries were heartbreakingly sad. November 15th. Rex is restless today. Does he sense that I'm giving up? November 18th. I don't feel like getting out of bed anymore. What for? No one notices I'm here anyway. November 20th. If something happens to me, who will take care of Rex? Carol closed the notebook with tears in her eyes. The next entry would have been from the day of the accident, but Mrs. Miller never had the chance to write it. Late that afternoon, Carol and Rex went to visit Helen at the hospital. When they walked into the room, the elderly woman's face lit up in a way Carol had never seen. "Rex, my boy!" Helen held out her arms, and the dog very gently placed his front paws on the bed so she could hug him. "How are you feeling?" Carol asked, pulling a chair close to the bed. "Much better now that you're here?" "The doctor said I'll be here for another week, maybe 2. That's a long time to leave Rex with you." "Mrs. Miller, it's no trouble at all. In fact, I think he's teaching me some important things." "How so?" Carol hesitated for a moment. "I've also been living alone for years. My kids moved away. I retired, and I ended up isolating myself too. But taking care of Rex, seeing how much he loves you, how he was willing to do anything to save you, it made me realize how much I was missing." Helen took Carol's hand. "Sometimes God sends angels in disguise to our lives. I think Rex was an angel for both of us." Carol smiled. "I think you're right." Over the next week, a special routine was established. Carol would wake up early, make coffee for herself and breakfast for Rex. Then the two would cross the street to take care of Helen's house. It was a way to keep everything in order and also let Rex be surrounded by his owner's scent. Carol found that she enjoyed this new responsibility. Rex was a quiet but constant companion who seemed to understand her moods and needs. When she felt sad or anxious, he would appear at her side. When she was busy, he would lie down nearby and just watch. "You know something, Rex?" she said one morning while watering Helen's plants. "It's been years since I felt this useful. Years since someone truly needed me." The dog wagged his tail, as if in agreement. That afternoon, when they went to visit Helen, she was sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking better and more cheerful. "Look at you, you're doing so much better," Carol exclaimed. "The doctor said I might be discharged at the end of the week, but I'll need physical therapy, and also—" Helen hesitated. "They'll need to install some grab bars at the house, maybe a walker. Old age is really setting in." Rex moved closer and rested his head on Helen's lap, as if sensing the worry in her voice. "Helen, can I make a suggestion?" Carol sat in the chair beside her. "What if we helped each other from now on? I live alone, you live alone. We can keep in touch, have meals together sometimes. I can help with the shopping." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "You'd really do that, but why?" "Because Rex taught me something important. He didn't hesitate for a second to get help when you needed it. He showed me that looking out for one another is what truly makes us human. And I always thought I was being a burden to people. Helen, you're not a burden. You're an incredible person who deserves care and companionship, and I need that in my life too." Just then, a nurse came into the room. "Sorry to interrupt, but are you Mrs. Miller's family?" Carol and Helen looked at each other. "Not exactly," Carol began. "We are," Helen said firmly. "Yes, we are family." The nurse smiled. "That's wonderful, because she's always talking about you, especially about that special dog who saved her life." When they left the hospital that afternoon, Carol felt different. There was a lightness in her chest she hadn't experienced in years. Rex walked beside her, and she realized she wasn't just taking care of him anymore. They were taking care of each other. "Rex, what do you think about rearranging your mom's house to make it safer for her?" she asked as they crossed the street. Back at Helen's house, Carol started making a mental list of the necessary improvements. Grab bars in the bathroom, non-slip rugs, better lighting in the hallways. She called one of her sons who lived in another city and would need to spend a few days researching and organizing everything. While she made the calls, Rex lay down on the living room rug where he always stayed with Helen. Carol stopped what she was doing and watched him for a moment. "You know you changed our lives, don't you?" she said softly. "You taught us that we don't have to be alone, that there's always someone who cares, even when we don't realize it." Rex lifted his head and looked at her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand every word. "Well," she continued, "I think it's time for me to learn how to be a better person, and you're going to teach me, aren't you?" The dog stood up, came over to her, and placed his paw in her hand, as if sealing a deal. The day of Helen's discharge arrived on a sunny Saturday morning. Carol had spent the last 2 days preparing the house with the help of a local handyman, installing grab bars and rearranging furniture to make it easier to get around. Rex supervised every change, as if making sure everything was perfect for his owner's return. "Ready to go home?" Carol asked when she arrived at the hospital. Helen, now using a walker, smiled broadly. "More than ready. I've missed my house so much. And my garden." During the ride back, Helen looked out the window with an expression of joy Carol hadn't seen before. "You know, Carol, these days in the hospital made me realize a lot of things. Mostly that I had allowed myself to become invisible. I stopped living for fear of bothering other people. And now I know I have a friend who cares about me and a dog who can move mountains when I need him to." When they arrived home, Rex was ecstatic. He ran all through the house, sniffing every corner, making sure everything was as it should be. When he saw the modifications Carol had made, he wagged his tail in approval. "Wow, it looks so different," Helen exclaimed. "Seeing the grab bars and new layout, you thought of everything." "We thought of everything," Carol corrected. "Rex helped me decide where to put everything." That afternoon, they sat in the backyard, which Carol had tended during Helen's absence. Rex lay between them, finally relaxed now that his family was back together. "Carol, can I tell you something?" Helen said after a long, comfortable silence. "Of course. The day I fell, before Rex went to get help, I was thinking about giving up. I thought no one would miss me, that it would be easier to just let it happen." Carol felt her heart tighten. "Helen, but when I saw Rex come back with you, when I saw that he hadn't given up on me, I realized I couldn't give up either. He taught me that it's always worth fighting, always worth believing that someone will show up to help." The two sat in silence for a moment, watching Rex doze peacefully in the afternoon sun. "I have a confession too," said Carol. "Before Rex showed up on my doorstep, I was becoming a bitter person. I had lived alone for so long that I'd forgotten how good it feels to be needed, how good it feels to take care of someone. And now I know that life didn't end when my children left home. In fact, I think a new chapter is just beginning." Helen smiled. "A chapter where 2 lonely old ladies discover they don't have to be alone." "Exactly. And it's all thanks to a brave dog who refused to accept his owner being left without help." As if he knew they were talking about him, Rex opened his eyes and looked at the 2 women. Then he got up, went to Helen, and rested his head in her lap, receiving a pat. Next, he did the same with Carol. "Look at that," Helen said, laughing. "I think he's splitting his love equally between us." "He knows we're a family now," Carol replied, stroking the dog's head. Just then, Carol's phone rang. It was one of Helen's children, calling to see how her arrival home had gone. "Honey, everything is perfect," Helen said when Carol passed her the phone. "And I want you to meet Carol, my new best friend, and Rex, the hero who saved my life." While Helen chatted with her son, recounting the whole story of the rescue, Carol looked around the garden that she would now tend along with her own. Two houses, two lives that had found each other through the courage and loyalty of a special dog. Life had taken on a completely new meaning. The weeks that followed brought a complete transformation to both their routines. Carol would wake up every morning and cross the street to have coffee with Helen. Rex would accompany them from one house to the other, as if he were the link holding this new family together. "Good morning, family," Carol would say every morning as she entered Helen's kitchen, where she always found the table set for two and a bowl of fresh water for Rex. "Good morning, dear. How did you sleep?" Helen would always reply with the same affection. Helen's physical therapy sessions had become a social event. Carol would go with her, and Rex would wait patiently in the waiting room, where he quickly became the favorite mascot of patients and staff. "Mrs. Miller, your recovery has been exceptional," the physical therapist said during one session. "Normally, people your age take much longer to regain mobility after this type of fracture." "It's the power of having reasons to recover quickly," she replied, looking at Carol and Rex through the glass wall of the room. One afternoon, as they tended their gardens together, Helen made an observation that surprised Carol. "You know, dear, I was thinking, what if we hosted a tea for the other ladies on the street? There's Mrs. Mary, who lives 3 houses down, Mrs. Tony on the corner. They live alone, too." Carol stopped watering the plants and looked at Helen with admiration. "You want to help other people who might be in the same situation we were?" "Exactly. Rex taught us that we should never assume someone is okay just because they don't ask for help. Maybe there are other Helens on our street who need a friend." The idea for the tea quickly became a reality. The following Saturday, Helen's garden was full of women from the neighborhood who hadn't spoken properly in years. Rex circulated among them all, receiving pets and attention as if he knew he was responsible for the gathering. "Ladies, you have no idea how much I needed this," said Mary, a 75-year-old woman who had lived alone since her son moved to another state. "Sometimes I go days without talking to anyone." But why did none of you ever say anything?" Carol asked. "We could have organized something sooner." "Embarrassment, I think," replied Tony. "You don't want to seem needy or desperate." Helen took Carol's hand. "That's exactly how I felt. Until Rex taught me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage." "Tell them the whole story," Mary requested. All afternoon, Helen and Carol retold the story of the rescue, with Rex lying in the center of the group, like the hero he was. The other ladies listened, fascinated, some with tears in their eyes. "It's incredible how an animal can be so smart," said Tony. "He understood exactly what he needed to do." "And more importantly," Carol added, "he taught us that no one has to be alone, that there is always someone willing to help if we just have the courage to accept it." By the end of the afternoon, as the guests were leaving, the women had established a new tradition: monthly rotating teas at each other's houses, starting with Rex's Friends Club, as they decided to call themselves. "Look what you've done, boy," said Helen, petting Rex as he stretched in the late afternoon sun. "You not only saved my life, but you created a whole family of people who care about each other." Carol sat on the grass beside them. "You know what I learned today? That there are 2 kinds of family. The one you're born into and the one you choose. And sometimes the one you choose is even stronger. And sometimes," Helen said, smiling, "the one who helps you choose that family has 4 paws and a heart the size of the world." Rex wagged his tail, as if he understood perfectly that he was responsible for all this happiness. 2 months after the accident, Rex's story had spread throughout the town. A local journalist heard about the case and wrote a feature in the newspaper titled "Hero Dog Saves Senior and Transforms Neighborhood." The article brought unexpected visitors and interview requests, which Helen and Carol politely declined. They preferred the simplicity of the new life they had built. But there was one unexpected consequence of the article. Helen's phone began to ring frequently. It was people who had read the story and wanted to share their own experiences with special animals, or simply to say how much the story had touched them. "Hello, Mrs. Miller," said a female voice one Tuesday morning. "My name is Carla. I read about Rex in the paper. I wanted to tell you that your story gave me the courage to adopt a dog. I've lived alone for years and was always afraid of the responsibility, but—" Helen spent an hour talking with Carla, giving her advice on how to care for her new companion. When she hung up, she was beaming. "Carol, do you realize what's happening? Rex's story is inspiring other people to open themselves up to love and companionship." Carol smiled. "And there's more. Mrs. Rose told me yesterday that she decided to reach out to her daughter after years of not speaking. She said our story made her realize that life is too short to hold grudges." Rex, lying on his favorite cushion, lifted his head as if he understood they were talking about him. He had become a small local celebrity, but remained the same gentle, loving dog he had always been. That afternoon, during their daily walk through the neighborhood, now a tradition to help with Helen's physical therapy, they stopped at the park where several children were playing. "Look, it's Rex!" shouted a boy of about 7. "The hero dog!" Soon, a small crowd of children had gathered around them. Rex, with his infinite patience, allowed all of them to pet and play with him. "Miss Carol, is it true that he saved the grandma?" asked a little girl with curly hair. "It is true," Carol replied. "And do you know what he taught us? That we can all be heroes when we help someone who needs it." "But he's just a dog," said another boy. "Exactly," said Helen, bending down to the children's level. "He's just a dog, but he has a giant heart. And you can have giant hearts too, no matter how old you are." One of the mothers watching the scene approached. "Sorry to bother you, but you're the ladies from the newspaper story, right? I wanted to thank you. My daughter was afraid to help a new classmate at school. She thought the other kids would laugh at her, but after you told Rex's story, she completely changed. Now she says she wants to be like the hero dog." Carol and Helen looked at each other, moved. They never imagined their story would have this kind of impact. When they returned home, they found a surprise waiting on the doorstep. A large envelope filled with colorful drawings. It was from a nearby school, where the teacher had told Rex's story to her students. "Look at this, Rex," said Helen, showing him the drawings. "The children made portraits of you." The drawings showed Rex in various versions, with a superhero cape, with a diploma for World's Best Dog, in front of Helen's house with a halo over his head. In all of them, the dog was smiling. Carol held up one drawing where Rex appeared alongside 2 smiling old ladies. "This one shows our family," she said fondly. That evening, before they each went back to their own homes, the 3 of them sat in the garden for their usual ritual, gazing at the stars and reflecting on the day. "You know what I've discovered, Carol," said Helen. "We spent our whole lives thinking our stories were already written, that after a certain age, nothing important happens anymore. And we discovered we were wrong. We discovered that sometimes the best stories begin when we least expect them, and sometimes the one who writes those stories has 4 paws and an unconditional love." Rex slept between them, and in the quiet of the night, they both knew their lives had found a completely new purpose. 1 year after the day Rex appeared, desperate, on Carol's doorstep, the 2 friends were organizing the first neighborhood adoption fair at the local park. What had started as a simple friendship between neighbors had blossomed into a movement of solidarity that involved the entire community. "I never imagined our story would come this far," Carol said, as she helped set up the pens where rescued dogs would be introduced to their future families. And to think it all started because you listened to the plea of an injured dog, replied Helen, who now walked without difficulty and had become the volunteer coordinator for the project. Rex, now wearing a shiny new collar with a tag that read Local Hero, supervised the setup as if he were the event's official organizer. He had become not only a symbol of hope in the neighborhood, but also an example of how loyalty and love can transform lives. During the fair, dozens of families showed up, interested in adopting the rescued animals. Carol watched each adoption with joy in her heart, remembering how her own life had changed since Rex entered it. Miss Carol, called the little girl with curly hair who always appeared at the park. My parents said I can adopt a dog. I want one just like Rex. Honey, Rex is one of a kind, Carol replied warmly, but I'm sure any dog you choose will be special in its own way. The girl ended up choosing a mixed-breed puppy that couldn't stop wagging its tail whenever it saw her. I'm going to name him Little Hero, she announced proudly. At the end of the afternoon, as the fair was wrapping up and almost all the animals had found new homes, Helen stepped onto the small, makeshift stage to give a speech. Friends and neighbors, she began, her voice filled with emotion. A year ago, I was on my kitchen floor, alone and without hope. Today, I'm here, surrounded by people who have become my family, organizing an event that has helped so many animals find love. The small crowd applauded, and Rex, sitting beside the stage, wagged his tail as if he understood the applause was for him. All of this happened because one injured dog refused to give up. He taught me that it's never too late to start over, never too late to form new bonds, and that we should never assume we're alone in the world. Carol joined her on stage and took the microphone. Helen forgot to mention the most important part of the story. Rex didn't just save her life, he saved mine, too. He pulled me out of my isolation and showed me that taking care of one another is what gives life meaning. When the event was over and they were packing up, the two friends sat on a park bench with Rex lying at their feet. You know what I find most incredible about this whole story? Said Helen. What? Rex didn't just change our lives. He changed the lives of dozens of people we met because of him. It's like he created a wave of kindness that just keeps spreading. Carol looked around the park, where families were still playing with their new furry companions. And the best part is knowing that this wave will continue. Every animal that was adopted today will touch other lives, create other connections. It's as if Rex taught us that life isn't about what we can get, but about what we can give. Rex lifted his head and looked at the two women with those wise eyes that seemed to understand every word. Then he did something he always did to show his affection. He placed one paw on each of their hands. "Thank you, boy," whispered Helen. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for teaching us that family is who we choose to love," Carol added. And as the sun set on that perfect day, the three of them remained there, knowing they had found something that many people spend their whole lives searching for, the true meaning of being home. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and tell us in the comments about a special animal that has made a mark on your life. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have many more emotional stories of animal love and compassion to share with you.